regret it so much. My husband found out about me kissing another man and now he doesn't want me. Hello, Reddit. I've been a long-time lurker on this app, but I've never posted anything until now. If someone had told me 3 months ago that this would be my life, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have called them a liar. But now, I'm faced with the reality that I've ruined my home and marriage. I'm tired of the way things are between me and my husband, and I desperately want things to go back to how they were before. I want my husband to forgive me and move on, and for things to be just as they were. I'm hoping that by posting here, I'll get some insight and advice on what to do. Any advice you guys can provide me with will be honestly appreciated. What did I do, you might be wondering? Well, I kissed someone else on a night out with my friends, and my husband found out about it. Ever since then, he has not touched me. Here's some backstory. My name is Taylor, and I am a 25-year-old woman. I've been with my husband Eric, who is a 24-year-old man, for about 2 years now. It was a whirlwind romance. We met at a friend's birthday party about 3 years ago, and we were instantly smitten with each other. We exchanged contacts and decided to keep in touch. We went on our first date 2 days after we met at the party, and then in a few weeks we were dating. A few months later, I had moved in with Eric the moment my lease expired. Eric was from a well-to-do family, while I came from a family so poor there were times we had to rely on food stamps. So things were a lot easier for him than they were for me. Barely a year after dating, we got married. Eric's parents paid for the wedding on the basis that I signed a prenup. I didn't mind. I loved Eric, and I agreed. The parents, of course, went with their promise and sponsored the wedding, and it was absolutely perfect. Eric's love language is giving and acts of service, so he loves gifting me stuff, from expensive jewelry to the warmest handmade or thoughtful gifts. Eric really gives it all. He also loves acts of service, like I said earlier, and will give me a massage when he sees that I'm stressed or tired. He will cook and even took on about 90% of the house chores because he loves doing them. Despite that, he pulls in 100% of the income in our household. I've said earlier that Eric is from a wealthy family, so the moment he graduated, his family set him up really well in life. Why am I telling you all this? Just so you understand the perspective and how much freedom I had. Everything was done by Eric, and he did everything willingly, and we both enjoyed it. I'm also telling you this so you understand how much of a mistake I made. So all in all, our marriage was really good. Our sex life was really active. We made sure to go on date nights every Friday, just before the start of the weekend. We didn't have any kids yet, but we definitely wanted some. Our marriage wasn't just a storybook romance. It was real life, messy and beautiful. Eric and I were like two puzzle pieces that just fit together perfectly. We had our share of ups and downs, but we always found our way back to each other, stronger than before. What I loved most about our relationship was how we supported each other. Eric was always there to lift me up, to encourage me to chase my dreams. And I did the same for him, being his rock when things got tough. We had big plans for the future, like starting a family and growing old together. But then, I messed up. I made a mistake that is threatening to tear us apart. And now I'm left wondering if our love is strong enough to survive this. Eric and I were like two sides of a coin, each with our own unique traits that somehow blended perfectly together. Eric was the quiet one, the introvert who found peace in the stillness of our home. He was content with a small circle of friends and found comfort in their familiar company. I, on the other hand, was the social butterfly, always buzzing with energy and seeking out new connections. I thrived on human interaction and loved the lively chatter of gatherings and the warmth of friendship. Despite our differences, our relationship flourished. Eric's calm demeanor balanced out my outgoing nature, and my enthusiasm brought a spark of excitement to his life. That didn't always mean that things were always good between us. Eric didn't like most of my friends, especially the new ones, and he sometimes didn't like it when I went out, especially without him. I wouldn't call him controlling because he wasn't, and I now realize that he had a valid reason for not liking my friends. Eric isn't a social butterfly, like I've said before, so a lot of times I had to go out without him, which he didn't like most times because he liked being near me. 3 weeks back, we went to Eric's sister's wedding. It was not in town, but at a beautiful destination. The whole event was just stunning. I was one of the bridesmaids because Eric's sister and I are really close. The place where the wedding took place was absolutely breathtaking. It had such lovely views and a peaceful vibe that made everything feel magical. The ceremony itself was full of love and happiness, and you could really see how much the couple adored each other. Being part of the wedding was such a special experience. It made me think about love and family, and being there reminded me of the love I shared with Eric and how important it is to cherish it. The wedding was really nice, like I said before. Everything went smoothly, and it was just beautiful. We had a lot of fun celebrating with Eric's sister and her new husband. When we got back to town about 2 days later, some of our friends invited us out for a night out. Eric and I don't share a lot of the same friends, but we have a few mutual ones who invited us to join them for a few drinks. Eric was feeling pretty tired from all the socializing at the wedding, so he decided to stay home and recharge. He told me I could go if I wanted to, so I decided to go out with our friends without him. He was cool with that and just asked me to text him if I needed a ride home. Since I was planning on drinking, I didn't drive, and my friend picked me up. We went to the pub, and it was a blast. More friends showed up, and we had a great time chatting, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. It was a nice break from the usual routine, and I was getting really glad that I went out. As the drinks kept flowing, we got a bit more adventurous and decided to play Spin the Bottle. Normally, I wouldn't have gone for it, but my friends convinced me, saying I'd be a killjoy if I didn't join in. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. For a few rounds, the bottle didn't land on me, but then it did, and it landed on one of my guy friends. I hesitated at first, but I didn't want to seem like I was too uptight, so I went ahead with it. I figured everyone else was married too, and they were okay with it, so why shouldn't I be? After my turn, the game started to escalate. My friends began daring each other to do more and more outrageous things, like kissing for longer or doing some pretty suggestive moves. Luckily, the bottle didn't land on me again, so I just sat back and watched the craziness unfold. The night ended with a lot of us feeling pretty wasted, and my friend had to drive me back home. When I got home, my husband seemed a bit surprised at how much I had drunk, but he didn't say much about it. Instead, he made me some tea and then tucked me into bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling a bit hungover, but my husband was there, which was a pleasant thing. He told me he didn't have to go to work that day. He then told me he would make breakfast for me, and I was honestly touched by his thoughtfulness. I stayed in bed for a few more minutes, and I couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. I felt guilty about the kiss during the Spin the Bottle game. I didn't want to keep secrets from my husband, but at the same time, I felt like it wasn't something I should tell him. It was just a kiss, and it didn't mean anything. Besides, I was drunk too, and it wasn't like I had planned for it to happen. I wrestled with the idea of telling my husband for a while before a friend, who I never really liked, decided it would be a great idea to send the video to my husband. I had no clue about this until my husband stormed into our bedroom, video in hand, ready to confront me. I was shocked. I thought once my friend deleted the video, that would be the end of it. I felt terrible and wished I hadn't gone out that night. I tried explaining to my husband that I was drunk and it was just a silly game, but he wasn't buying it. The more I tried to explain, the more furious he became. My husband looked so furious and deeply hurt. He expressed that this incident reinforced his lack of trust in both me and my friends. He called me stupid for drinking so much and said he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. He expressed disgust at my actions, saying I should have known better. I was devastated. I felt like I had let him down and betrayed his trust. I tried to explain that I was sorry and that it was a mistake, but he wouldn't listen. He was so angry, and his words cut really deep. I couldn't stop crying. I felt so overwhelmed with regret and shame. I honestly couldn't help but feel a surge of anger towards my husband's best friend for sending the video and the friend who had recorded it. They had betrayed my trust and had caused so much pain and damage to my marriage. The whole situation was a literal mess, and I didn't know how we would ever recover from it. After the confrontation, my husband packed a bag and said he needed some time to think. He told me he didn't want to see me right then, and that it would be better if he left. I was at a loss for words. I didn't know how to convince him to stay, so I just nodded in resignation. He left, and I later learned that he had gone to stay at his best friend's house. He ended up staying there for a total of 3 days. During that time, I tried everything I could think of to coax him back home. I sent him numerous messages, but he remained distant. I couldn't bring myself to involve his family in our issues. They were staunchly against divorce, and I knew they would have strong opinions if they found out about the kiss. However, I confided in my elder brother, who I'm extremely close to, and he helped by texting my husband, urging him to come home. After 3 days, Eric finally came back home. He seemed calmer, but there was still a noticeable tension between us. It was clear that the incident had deeply affected our relationship, and it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been broken, but I honestly thought we would weather through it. I noticed that my husband had become really distant. He started sleeping in the guest room, and no matter how hard I tried, he refused to come back into our bedroom. It was like a physical barrier had formed between us, and no amount of pleading or reasoning could bridge the gap. Not only did he physically distance himself, but he also emotionally withdrew. He stopped doing all the little things he used to do before. He no longer offered me massages after a long day. He stopped cooking for me, and he seemed to bury himself in work, taking on even more hours than before. It was heartbreaking to see the man I loved and shared my life with pulling away from me. I felt lost and alone, unsure of how to reach him or how to mend our fractured relationship. His distance only served to deepen the sense of guilt and regret I felt over the events that had led us to this point. I tried so hard to reach out to my husband, to bridge the growing gap between us, but it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. It was in this moment that I realized just how much my husband had been the one trying in our relationship. He had been the one reaching out to me, doing everything he could to keep our connection strong. I had taken his efforts for granted, never fully appreciating all that he did for me. Now that he had stopped doing the housework and other things he used to do, I realized just how much he had been carrying on his shoulders. It was like he had been the bridge in our relationship, and now that he had refused to play that role anymore, there was a massive, unbridgeable gap between us. I tried to step up and take on more responsibilities around the house, but it was a daunting task. Our house was huge, and the chores seemed never-ending. I tried sleeping in the guest room with him, hoping to show him that I was there for him, but he refused, telling me to go back to my own room. He told me he still wasn't over what I had done and that he needed time and space. But how long would he need? And how could I make things right again? I am consumed with guilt and sorrow, and I am desperate to make amends. I started packing lunches for him and doing other things I had never done before, hoping to show him how sorry I was. But nothing seems to work. And that's why I'm here, Reddit. I've heard this app can be incredibly helpful, and I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to bridge the gap between me and my husband. I'm terrified that things will remain this way forever, and I don't want that. My husband is no longer the thoughtful, loving, quiet man he used to be. He's become cold and distant, and it feels like I'm living with a stranger. It's like he's no longer my husband, but just a roommate I've become acquainted with. It's heartbreaking, and I don't know what to do. I'm scared that if things don't change, we'll just keep growing apart until there's nothing left of our relationship. I want to fix things, to get back to how we used to be, but I don't know where to start. How can I make him see that I'm sorry and that I want to make things right? Any advice would be really appreciated. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while. Many of you may remember me as the woman who came here seeking advice because my marriage was falling apart after I kissed someone else while drunk. I honestly didn't think I would be back to update this post, as I posted here in a moment of desperation, seeking guidance. I didn't know what else to do, so I turned to this community. It's been 2 months since I first posted, and I've received numerous messages asking for an update, so here it is. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who offered advice and support. Your words meant a lot to me during a difficult time. Many of you suggested that I talk to my husband, believing that communication would help us work through our issues. So here's the update. For the next few weeks, things remained unchanged. My husband continued to be distant and unresponsive, as if he had erased me from his life. It was heartbreaking to see him change so drastically. I knew something had to be done, so I decided to have a serious conversation with him. I told him that we couldn't go on like this and that I wanted us to work things out. He admitted that he had been struggling with his feelings and wasn't sure if he could ever forgive me. Hearing those words shattered me. I loved him deeply, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. I suggested couples counseling as a last effort to save our marriage. My husband was hesitant at first, as he wasn't keen on therapy, but he agreed to give it a try. However, he also expressed that he felt it might be better for us to divorce. I was devastated by his words, but I couldn't ignore his feelings. I love him too much to force him to stay if he feels it's best to part ways. So I agreed to the divorce on the condition that we first try counseling. He agreed, and we began the process of seeking professional help. However, during this time, he told me that watching the video of me kissing someone else had changed everything for him. It was as if all the love and attraction he had felt for me had disappeared in an instant. He apologized for any pain he had caused me, but he also made it clear that he couldn't forgive me. As much as it hurts, I have to accept his decision. Attending couples counseling was a profound experience for both of us. It opened our eyes to many issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. During our sessions, my husband shared that he had always felt insecure about my social life and the friends I kept. This revelation cut deep because he had never expressed these feelings to me before. If he had, I would have made a concerted effort to address his concerns. However, it seemed that his silence had created a divide that was now difficult to bridge. He also reiterated the impact of watching the video of me kissing someone else. He explained that seeing that moment shattered his image of me and caused him immense pain. He said it was as if a part of his heart had been broken irreparably. Furthermore, my husband expressed feeling like he had always been the one putting in the effort in our relationship. He felt that he was constantly the initiator, the planner, the one driving the relationship forward. He mentioned that he often felt unappreciated and that his love for me was not reciprocated in the same way. Hearing these words was incredibly painful because deep down, I knew they were true. I had taken my husband's efforts for granted, assuming that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I now realized that my lack of effort and initiative had contributed to the strain between us. I loved my husband deeply, but I had failed to show it in the ways that mattered most to him. I had mistaken his actions as a preference rather than a necessity. It was a harsh reality to confront. I apologized to my husband from the depths of my heart and begged for his forgiveness. I explained to him that I had misunderstood his actions, believing that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I had assumed that he liked being the initiator and the planner, and as a result, I had not made the effort to reciprocate in the same way. After pouring my heart out and promising to change, my husband thanked me for my efforts. But he made it clear that he couldn't just forget about the kiss. He was still set on getting a divorce. I had hoped that by being sincere and showing him how much I regretted my mistake, he'd reconsider. But he was adamant. I do not know how things will play in court, but I have decided that I will do everything I can to make the divorce process as smooth as possible for him. It's a difficult and painful reality to face, but I have to respect his feelings and choices. My husband has given me a week to leave the house. That is more than enough time for me, and I'm just glad that we are going through everything as amicably as possible. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this journey. Your kindness and understanding have meant the world to me. I will always cherish the good times I had with my husband and the love we shared. It's a heartbreaking end to our marriage, but I believe it's the right decision for both of us. Also, don't cheat and for your mar.
Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be here sharing this, but here we go. My name's Cade, born and bred in the Windy City. I've always been the kind of guy who sees the glass half full, you know? It's this outlook that led me to meet Zaria, the most beautiful, vivacious woman I've ever known. I met her at a local Chicago jazz bar, and the moment I laid eyes on her, it felt like the universe was pointing at her and whispering, "That's the one for you." We hit it off immediately, and the rest, as they say, was history. We had our share of ups and downs, but we always felt like we were meant for each other. Our friends even called us the Dream Team. Fast forward to one summer evening. We're at a family BBQ at my parents' house. My parents had this huge backyard, perfect for these gatherings, with fairy lights strung all around, and a smell of grilled burgers wafting through the air. Everything felt right. Mom was chatting with some relatives, my younger sister was chasing her kids, and I was manning the grill with a cold beer in hand. But then I noticed it. Across the yard, Zaria was talking to my dad, Mr. Granger. Nothing unusual about that, right? They'd always been friendly. But this time, it was different. They stood a little too close, their voices just a whisper, heads inclined toward one another, almost sharing a secret. Every time I tried to approach, they'd suddenly break apart, laughing off whatever they were talking about. I brushed it off at first, thinking, "Cade, you're just being paranoid." But as the evening went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their secret exchanges kept gnawing at the back of my mind. And you know what's crazy? That tiny suspicion, that little seed of doubt, was about to change everything. Okay, Reddit, you won't believe what happened next. A couple of weeks after the BBQ incident, my birthday rolls around. Now, birthdays in our household are a big deal. Zaria and I always go all out for each other. Last year, she had taken me on a surprise weekend getaway to a cabin up in Wisconsin, and it was honestly one of the best weekends of my life. So, this year, I'm up early, the smell of coffee filling our apartment, anticipating what surprise she might have in store. She walks into the kitchen with this mysterious grin and hands me a small envelope. I'm thinking, gift card, a sweet note, maybe tickets to that concert I mentioned wanting to go to? But boy, was I off the mark. I tear open the envelope, and there it is. A ticket to Paris. Paris, the city of love. I mean, who wouldn't want to go, right? But here's the kicker. It's just one ticket. For me, alone. My eyes dart up to meet hers, searching for an explanation. Zarya, sensing my confusion, quickly says, "Babe, you've been so stressed with work lately. I just thought you could use some alone time to relax and explore. Paris has so much art, history, and culture. You'll love it." Don't get me wrong, the idea of wandering around Paris, sipping on coffee at quaint cafes, and visiting all those iconic spots was enticing. But why alone? Why wouldn't she want to share this with me? Every romantic movie scene set in Paris flashed through my mind, and I couldn't fathom experiencing it without her by my side. I tried to voice my concerns. Z, it's Paris. Shouldn't we experience it together? But she just brushed them aside, saying she had commitments she couldn't get out of, and she really wanted me to have this trip for myself. Reddit? I was torn. On one hand, it was an incredibly generous gift. On the other, my gut told me something was up. I had so many questions swirling in my head, but I tried to focus on the positive. Little did I know, this gift was just the beginning of a whirlwind of events. All right, Reddit. Strap in because things started getting really weird when I landed in Paris. So there I am, standing outside the airport, looking at the city before me with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I decided to give Zarya a call, letting her know I arrived safely and to hear her voice, but all I got was her voicemail. No big deal, I thought. Maybe she's just busy, and I'll catch her later. My first day was a blur, seeing the Eiffel Tower up close, wandering around Montmartre, indulging in delicious pastries. But every time I tried to capture a moment, whether it was a picture or a quick video, I felt this pang of loneliness, wishing Zarya was there to share it with me. Throughout the day, I attempted to call her multiple times, but either she didn't pick up or the conversations were weirdly short. The few times I did get through, Zarya sounded distracted, like there was something going on in the background. Her answers were short, her tone distant, and she always seemed in a rush to hang up. "Sorry, babe, super busy right now, talk later." And then click. It wasn't like her at all. One evening, after a beautiful Seine River cruise, I tried calling her again. She picked up, and I could hear faint murmurs and laughter in the background. Trying to keep the conversation light, I said, "Sounds like you're having a little party over there without me." Her response? A sudden silence followed by a quick, "Oh, just some TV, nothing special. I gotta go. Love you." Click. Now, Reddit. I'm not usually the jealous type, but my mind raced back to that summer evening and the hushed whispers between Zarya and my dad, Mr. Granger. An unease settled in the pit of my stomach, gnawing at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without evidence. My dream trip to Paris started feeling less like a dream and more like a confusing nightmare. I was surrounded by romance and beauty, but my mind was miles away, trying to piece together a puzzle that was becoming more complex by the minute. I had a few more days left in Paris, but with each passing hour, my worry and suspicion grew. The city's charm couldn't distract me from the nagging thoughts plaguing my mind. On a whim, I thought, why not head back early and surprise Zarya? Maybe all these concerns were in my head, and seeing her would clear the air. So, without letting Zarya know, I changed my flight and found myself heading back to Chicago sooner than expected. The entire flight, I played out different scenarios in my head. Maybe I'd walk in on a surprise party, or maybe Zarya would be thrilled and relieved to see me. The cab ride from the airport to our apartment felt like the longest journey ever. The city lights of Chicago blurred past as my heart raced with anticipation. I quietly let myself into our apartment, hoping to genuinely surprise her. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw. As I pushed open the door to our bedroom, I froze. There, In a moment that seemed straight out of a twisted movie, were Zaria and Mr. Granger, my own father, looking, well, far too intimate for comfort. The room echoed with their startled gasps. Time stood still. My mind struggled to process the scene in front of me. The love of my life and my father. It was a gut punch, a betrayal I'd never even considered. The weight of my earlier suspicions crashed down on me with a cruel clarity. Zaria scrambled to her feet, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Mr. Granger, on the other hand, looked as if he'd been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, guilty but almost smug about it. All I could muster, my voice shaking, was, "How could you?" Before anyone could answer, I turned on my heels and left, the image of their betrayal seared into my memory. That night, Reddit, my world shattered into a million pieces, and I was left trying to figure out how and why it all went wrong. The morning after the horrendous discovery, I was a mess. My phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from both Zaria and Mr. Granger. Despite the gut-wrenching image from last night, a part of me, maybe the naive, hopeful part, wanted an explanation, something that could make sense of it all. So, after taking a deep breath, I decided to confront them. I asked them to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown. As I waited, my heart pounding, I watched the rain pour down outside, mirroring the storm inside me. When they arrived, they looked almost coordinated. Their expressions were a mix of feigned surprise and concern. The conversation began with Zaria, her voice soft and shaky. "Cade, you've got it all wrong. I don't know what you think you saw, but it wasn't what it looked like." Mr. Granger chimed in, trying to sound fatherly and sincere. "Son, we were just comforting each other. Your Aunt Leela has been ill, and it's been tough for the family. We didn't want to burden you, especially with your trip." I sat there, stunned. They were turning the tables, making it seem like I was the one in the wrong, that my emotions and perceptions were flawed. "Are you seriously suggesting I imagined what I saw?" I retorted, my voice rising in disbelief. Zaria looked almost offended. "Cade, I love you. Why would I ever hurt you? You're probably jet-lagged, stressed, and you've misinterpreted a moment of comfort between family." The sheer audacity of their claims was mind-boggling. Here I was, raw and wounded, and they were trying to repaint reality, making me question my sanity. I felt like I was being sucked into a whirlwind of lies and manipulations. Their words, their denials, it was all gaslighting in its purest form. I stood up, my hands trembling. "I don't know what game you two are playing, but I'm not going to be a pawn in it." With that, I left, the weight of their betrayal and deceit pressing down on me. So, Reddit, just when I thought I hit rock bottom, I stumbled upon something that turned my world even more upside down. Days after our coffee shop confrontation, my emotions were a roller coaster. Part of me wanted to believe their story, while another part was consumed by doubt. In an attempt to find some sense of normalcy, I busied myself with cleaning the apartment. It was therapeutic in a way. Cleaning out the physical space felt like clearing out the emotional clutter in my mind. While organizing our bedroom, I stumbled upon a drawer I had rarely, if ever, looked into. As I rummaged through it, my hand brushed against a stack of envelopes hidden beneath some old scarves of Zaria's. Curiosity piqued. I took a closer look. The envelopes were addressed to Zaria but had no postal markings. That meant they were hand-delivered. And the sender's name? Mr. Granger. With a heavy heart, I braced myself for what I might find and began reading the first letter. What followed was a heart-wrenching dive into their secret world. Each letter was a testament to their illicit relationship, full of passionate expressions, recounting secret meetings, and shared memories that they believed no one else would ever know. One letter read, "Our stolen moments at the lake house last summer are etched into my heart. Whenever I close my eyes, I can still feel the warmth of your touch and the sound of our laughter echoing in the silent nights." Another detailed plans for them to meet up when I was away on business trips, with Mr. Granger writing, "Every second without you feels like an eternity, counting down the days until I can see you again." The truth was glaringly clear, and any last strand of denial was ripped away. The pain was unbearable, a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The very foundation of my marriage and relationship with my father crumbled in front of my eyes. That evening, sitting on the floor surrounded by those damning letters, I realized that the life I thought I knew was nothing but a facade. The challenge now was to confront them, with undeniable proof in hand. With the letters in hand, I waited for Zaria to return home. My heart raced as I heard her key turn in the lock. She walked in, her face lighting up in a smile, but that quickly faded as she caught the grim look on my face and saw the letters spread out on the table. "Cade," she started, her voice trembling, but I cut her off. "Did you ever plan on telling me?" I questioned, my voice cold and emotionless, though inside I was screaming. Zaria sank into a chair, her eyes darting to the letters. Tears began streaming down her face. I don't even know where to begin," she whispered. "You can start by telling me the truth," I snapped, my patience running thin. Taking a deep breath, she began. "It all started innocently. You were away so often for work, and I felt alone. And Mr. Granger, he was just there. He listened, and one thing led to another." I couldn't believe my ears. "So you're blaming this on me being away? On my job? The job that provided for us, for our home, our life?" "No, Cade," she sobbed. "I'm not blaming you. It's all on me. It's my mistake. I got lost, and before I realized, we were too deep into this. As much as I wanted to walk away, to shout, to scream, I found myself just sitting there, numb, trying to process her confession. Every word she uttered felt like a dagger to my heart. The woman I loved, my father, the betrayal, it was overwhelming. Rate it in that moment, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion swirled inside me. The trust we had built over years had shattered in an instant. "I'm so sorry, Cade," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. But apologies felt hollow. Nothing could undo the hurt and the damage. That night, our home, once filled with laughter and love, was steeped in a deafening silence, punctuated only by the occasional sniffle or sigh. Hey Reddit, the saga continues, and I never imagined the revelations I'd uncover next. Needing some space and fresh perspective, I decided to visit my mother, Mrs. Granger, in New York. Maybe she could offer some insight or at the very least a comforting embrace. I booked a last-minute flight, and the next day I found myself amidst the bustling streets of the Big Apple. My mother lived in a quaint brownstone in Brooklyn. I hadn't informed her of my sudden visit, hoping the element of surprise would allow us some genuine bonding time. When she opened the door and saw me, her face lit up with a mix of surprise and delight. "Cade, what a wonderful surprise!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a warm hug. As we settled into her cozy living room, sipping on some herbal tea, she noticed the heaviness in my eyes. "What's troubling you, sweetie?" she asked with genuine concern. Taking a deep breath, I began recounting the entire sordid tale. As I spoke, I watched her expressions shift, surprise, disbelief, and finally, heartbreak. When I finished, she took a moment, looking out the window, gathering her thoughts. "Cade," she began softly. "I never wanted to admit it, even to myself. But I've always had this nagging feeling that your father had a wandering eye. There were late-night calls, hushed conversations, and many unexplained absences. But I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined it would be with Zaria." My heart sank. The realization that my mother had endured her own set of suspicions and betrayals made the situation even more tragic. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our shared pain forming an unspoken bond between us. Mrs. Granger finally broke the silence, her voice firm. "You deserve better than this, Cade. We both do. It's high time we confronted your father and sought the closure we need." That evening, Reddit, amidst the New York skyline, I felt a mix of emotions, pain, betrayal, but also a newfound determination. Armed with my mother's support, I was ready to face Mr. Granger and demand the truth. While still in New York, I decided to meet up with an old friend from college, Loxley. We had lost touch over the years, but reconnected through social media a few months back. A meetup seemed like a good distraction, considering everything. We decided to grab coffee at a quirky little cafe in Greenwich Village. As soon as I walked in, Loxley, with his signature wild curls and infectious smile, waved me over. After a warm embrace and initial catch-up, he noticed the storm cloud over my face. "Man, you look like you've been through the ringer," he remarked, concern evident in his eyes. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, "What the hell?" and spilled everything. His expression shifted from surprise to recognition. Once I finished, he took a deep breath, looking uneasy. "Cade, I didn't know how to bring this up, especially with everything you've been through. But I've seen Zaria and Mr. Granger together, multiple times." My heart sank further. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" He ran his hand through his curls, looking distressed. I know. I should have, but man, I didn't want to be the one to bring you such heartbreak. I hoped I was just misinterpreting things, but with everything you've told me, it's clear I wasn't." The initial shock gave way to gratitude. Loxley, seeing my distress, put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Look, we've been through thick and thin, right? I'm here for you. Whatever you need, even if it's just to vent or have a drinking buddy." His words were a balm to my wounded soul. Amidst all the betrayal and chaos, having someone on my side offering genuine support meant the world. That evening, as we walked the vibrant streets of New York, reminiscing about our college days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Despite the darkness, I had allies, people who cared, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'd find a way to navigate this storm. I hit rock bottom. I found myself dragging my feet into a therapist's cold office in the heart of Manhattan, a place I once swore I'd never go to. Dr. Elowin's reputation preceded her, the hard-hitting therapist with zero sugarcoating. Her stark office, all sharp lines and neutral tones, did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. She sat behind a sleek desk, her icy blue eyes sizing me up, a challenge in her gaze. "Speak," she commanded rather than asked. I spilled it all, raw and unfiltered. To my surprise, she didn't offer the comforting nods or the gentle, "I understand," I expected. Instead, she listened, her gaze never wavering, making me feel like a specimen under a microscope. Once my tale of betrayal was out, she leaned back, her expression inscrutable. "Cade, life's brutal. People betray, but wallowing won't get you anywhere." I bristled. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one being stabbed in the back." She leaned in, her voice firm. "Then pull the knife out. Decide if Zaria and your father are worth the pain or if they're dead weight. Can you trust them again? If not, cut them off. It's survival." It was harsh, brutal, even. But amidst the sting of her words, I felt a spark of anger, a fiery determination. Maybe it was time to stop playing the victim and take control. By the end of our intense session, I stepped out into the Manhattan chaos feeling invigorated. Dr. Elowin's brutally honest words resonated. It's survival, and I was ready to fight. Reddit, confronting Zaria was a storm, but facing my father? That was a hurricane. The following evening, I stood outside my parents' brownstone in Brooklyn, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was there. I needed answers, and no amount of dread would stop me. The moment I walked in, the tension was palpable. Mr. Granger sat in the living room, whiskey in hand, while the TV played some forgotten news. He looked up, surprise evident in his eyes. "Cade, what are you—" "No pleasantries," I interrupted, my voice steely. "We need to talk." For a moment, there was a standoff. Then, with a heavy sigh, he switched off the TV. "Fine, let's get this over with." I wasted no time, throwing the letters I found onto the coffee table. "Explain." He glanced at the letters, his expression darkening. Then, shockingly, he chuckled. "Ah, so you've discovered our little secret." "Secret? Dad, you betrayed me, with my wife," I shouted, my anger boiling over. He took a long sip of his whiskey, then smirked. "It takes two, you know. Zaria wasn't exactly an unwilling participant." My blood ran cold. "Are you trying to put the blame on her?" He leaned forward, a sly grin on his face. "Cade, open your eyes. If she could do this with me, what's stopping her from doing it with anyone else? Maybe she already has." I reeled from his words, rage and hurt mixing in a toxic cocktail. "You're my father. How could you do this?" He shrugged, the epitome of indifference. Life happens, son. People get bored. Opportunities arise. I felt a deep revulsion I'd never felt before. This wasn't the father I grew up admiring. This was a stranger, an enemy. "You're dead to me," I hissed, my voice laced with venom. Without another word, I stormed out, leaving behind the shattered remains of a father-son bond that could never be mended. Hey, Reddit. I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, but the universe apparently had other plans. A few days after the confrontation with my father, I walked into the house we once called home to an unsettling silence. Usually, Zaria's presence filled the rooms, but now a cold emptiness gripped the space. On the dining table, amidst memories of shared meals and laughter, lay a single thick envelope with my name on it. My heart sank. With trembling hands, I opened it. Zaria's handwriting, which I'd come to know so well, flowed across multiple pages. "Dear Cade, if you're reading this, it means I've left Chicago. Before you jump to conclusions or feel a fresh wave of anger, please hear me out. Our love story was real, Cade. The late-night talks, the laughter, the dreams we built together. None of it was a lie. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. The loneliness when you were away, the vulnerability, and the twisted attention from your father. It all created a storm I couldn't navigate. I'm not saying this to justify what I did, but I hope it sheds some light on the why. I never meant to hurt you. I realize now that in trying to fill a void, I created a chasm between us that may never be bridged. And for that, I am truly, deeply sorry. You deserve happiness, love, and above all, trust. I've come to see that by staying, I might become a constant reminder of betrayal, pain, and broken promises. So I'm stepping away, giving you the space you need to heal, to rebuild. Please know that my love for you was, and always will be, genuine. Maybe one day, when the wounds have faded, we can find a way to be in each other's lives, even if it's not in the way we once imagined. Wishing you peace and healing, Zaria. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. A cocktail of emotions surged through me. Anger, pain, loss, and a heartbreaking longing for what we once had. The house, our memories, they all felt haunted now. With every step, echoes of our past taunted me. And as night fell, I sat amidst the deafening silence, clutching the letter, grappling with the magnitude of the loss. After reading Zaria's letter, I was a mess. I roamed the empty rooms of our home, the walls echoing her words and our shared memories. On a particularly sleepless night, I stumbled across her old phone while clearing out some of her belongings. The battery was still alive, and against my better judgment, I unlocked it. The latest messages were from a name I didn't recognize, Rune. Hey beautiful, miss you already. Last night was magical, can't wait to see you again. My heart raced as I scrolled, each message more intimate than the last. They spoke of secret meetings, stolen moments, and memories I knew nothing about. Memories that happened while we were still together. The weight of it all crashed down on me. I felt nauseated, a raw, jagged pain piercing through. First my father, and now this, Rune. Some unknown man who shared secret moments with my wife while I was left in the dark. I tried to process it all. Was our entire marriage a sham? How many more betrayals would surface? How much more could I take before breaking entirely? I hurled the phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall, much like the remnants of my faith in love. I felt robbed, not just of my trust, but of my ability to believe in genuine relationships. The wound from my father's betrayal was still fresh, and this new revelation felt like salt on it. Sinking to the floor, I let out a guttural scream, the pain, anger, and betrayal pouring out. The walls of our once happy home now felt like a prison, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape from. After everything with Zaria and those soul-crushing revelations, Chicago became suffocating. Every alley, every diner, every park bench felt like it was mocking me with memories. The house, once filled with laughter and dreams, felt haunted. It became a constant reminder of my broken heart and the shattered illusions of love. I had to get out, so I sold it. The process was numbing, seeing strangers walk through, judging the remnants of my past, but it sold. And with a heavy heart, I packed what was left of my life. I'd heard of Asheville, It wasn't the cheerful allure of a small town that drew me in, but its promise of anonymity. I needed a place where no one knew my name, my story, or the weight of the baggage I carried. The first weeks were rough. I had this naive hope that a change of scenery would change everything inside me. But pain, it turns out, doesn't care about postcodes. Nights became a blur of insomnia and echoing silences. The house felt too big, too empty, the mountains too quiet, and the town too unfamiliar. I tried to blend in, took solitary walks, visited local bars where I'd often find myself staring into the amber depths of my drink, searching for answers that weren't there. The locals attempted to be friendly, but I mostly kept to myself. The less they knew, the fewer the chances of pitying looks or awkward conversations. Writing used to be my escape. Now every word felt forced, every sentence a reminder of the story I was trying to forget. So I stopped. Let the pages gather dust and the pen run dry. It wasn't all darkness, though. I did find solace in the vastness of nature, the enormity of the mountains, the never-ending forests. They made my problems feel minuscule. Not gone, but bearable. I wish I could wrap this up with a hopeful message, Reddit. But life isn't always about neat endings or silver linings. Sometimes it's just about surviving, taking it one breath at a time, and hoping the next day is a tad bit easier than the last. Hello again, Reddit. This will be my last post. The weight of betrayal hasn't eased, and Asheville, though distant from my past, brings no magic cure. Each day is a battle, and I'm constantly reminded that healing isn't linear. But here's the thing, life moves on, whether we're ready or not. I'm learning to find small moments of peace, brief respites from the chaos within. Some days are better, some are worse. I don't know what the future holds. But for now, I'm here, trying. Maybe that's all we can do. Thank you for being a part of my journey. Signing off.